folks, I'm coming to you fresh-faced today. I took a shower not too long ago, and since I already took a shower, I didn't feel like putting makeup on my face just to wash my face off again. I've got my new inclusive pride flag in. I don't think you can see the top part, but it is the progressive or inclusive pride flag, so I'm very excited about that and having that up in the background. This is episode 2, video 2, whatever we want to call it, of the Fairly Historical series. In this video, I take you through the actual process of hacking the modern commercial pattern. I show you how I draw onto the pattern and cut that out to make it more match the pattern that we found in the historical costumes and how to make them. And then I take you through cutting out the fabric of the lining. So we have two lining fabrics. We have a canvas and a muslin. The canvas is there for a little bit of stability, and the muslin is there for a little, because it's nice and soft. And then we have the outer fabric, which is the flannel. One thing I wanted to talk about during this, I thought I was going to bone this. I thought real long and hard about boning this project. I even filmed myself drawing on the boning channels. Then I sewed the boning channels, and then I decided not to use the boning channels. So I decided after trying on the garment with just the 3 layers together that the canvas in and of itself was plenty sturdy and gave me the amount of support that I wanted, and I wanted this to be a nice, easy to move in garment. So you will see some blue chalk lines on the lining fabric at some point. Well, that's where I sewed the boning channels and decided not to use them. So all of that, those zip ties that I purchased that I plan on using for boning will go to another project. So I always use boning I need boning for all kinds of things. So that's going to go to another project. I'll just put it in my stash and keep moving. So I'm going to take you through some interesting. The lighting on this is not great. Again, I'm still working on lighting. I got a ring light. I'm trying things out. I do not expect any of my first videos to be great. I expect me to be trying and learning a bunch of stuff. This is the first video in which I'm doing voiceover, so I have voiceover for different parts. It's probably really choppy in the editing. At this point, I don't care that much because I'm learning. And if I were just to do all this stuff and do all the editing and try it out, to not put it up on the internet, I would feel like I would be doing myself a disservice, because if I put it up on the internet, I get criticism, both good and bad. I prefer constructive criticism. If you have any, please put it in the comments down below. The other reason I'm doing this, I think I may have talked about this before, is I'm doing this because I have a lot of knowledge up in my head, and since I can't talk to people very much because of quarantine, this is again during, this is July of 2020, and we are in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, and we're still being quarantined. Since I can't go meet and talk to other people, like-minded people, I'm talking to the internet. I'm screaming out into the void, and if I can teach one person one thing with any of these videos, then I am a happy, happy lady. So this is video 2. Video 3 will be me showing you how I do the skirt and how I sew on the lacing rings, and then probably from there I'll show you a full outfit. So it'll probably just gonna be a 3 video series, depending on how long that one is. It might be full outfit, might be video 4. I don't know. Again, I'm winging it on a lot of this, and I do not feel ashamed in doing that. I know that I need to order better lighting. I know I need to probably get a better camera. I need to get a better mic. I need to get better equipment. I need to work on writing scripts. All of these things I need to work on. I am always a work in progress, and all of the things I make are always a work in progress. There's clothing that I've made a few years ago that I'm always tweaking and adding things to, or changing things, or taking a dart out or putting a dart in. So I think anything and everything could be changed and adjusted and moved around. So that includes myself and my life. So I'm practicing, I'm working, I am hopefully teaching people some stuff. If at the very least I'm teaching you how to be brave on the internet, how to put yourself out there in a way that you feel confident in doing, and teaching people things that you know how to do. So here it is. Episode 2 of Fairly Historical, making the bodice. I hope you enjoy. Here we have the 2 commercial pattern pieces. I cut these out on the largest size, which is 16. I have a fairly large bust, so I'm going to go with the largest. This is the front piece. This is the back piece. And I want each of these individual pieces to look like you're about to see the book come up. Here we go. That's the sleeve. We want the back to look like, that's what we want the front to look like. That's what we want the back to look like. So I'm going to do what I can to take this modern commercial pattern and adapt it. This is my cat Sekhmet. She decided she wanted to help. She was being very adorable. All you can see is her back end right now, but for some reason she decides that she just wants to lay all over this pattern piece. So in just a few seconds, I'm going to, here I am, getting her out of the way. She protests a bit. I place her on the couch, and she will be making an appearance very, very soon. So I get the back piece, and if you can see on the back piece, it has some kind of curved darts. Here she comes. Back on the same pattern piece, rubbing her little butt all over it. I'm going to remove her again. She protests even more. At this point, I ball up some of the discarded pattern paper and make it a ball and throw it to her so she can play with it. So here we are, back to the pattern. You can see it's got some curved darts. What I do is, because there are 3 different sizes, the larger, smaller, and middle sizes, what I do is I take the middle size and I start at the top. I think it said 10, it said like 8, 10, 12, or 10 and 12 on here. And then so it's like 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I'm taking my ruler and I start with the dot at the top, and the bottom, I go to the widest part of the dart at the bottom to make this kind of triangle. So I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to draw the line on first with pencil. And then what I'm going to do after that is so here it is with pencil to make sure I get it where I want it to go. And then, so that's from one side, and then I go to the top to the right side. There is a lovely picture of my arm. So what I'm going to do now is I grab the scissors, realize I couldn't really see the pencil marks that great. So I take a red permanent marker. I already know where I want the, oh, this is terrible, marks to go. So I mark with red permanent marker, just any kind of marker or darker pen would work. This is just what I had nearby. So now that I can see the marks and you can see the marks, I am going to cut this out. This is basically the only change I make to the back piece of this pattern. There isn't a whole lot more to change on the back piece. More of the hacking and editing goes on the front piece. So here I go. So you'll see this looks very much like the back piece of the garment that you see in the historic costumes and how to make them. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and I pull up the front piece, the front part of the bodice. One reason why I chose this particular pattern, this commercial pattern, is because it has no front darts. It is just one solid piece in the front. What I do there is, you see me making a mark. That is actually, I have held the pattern up to my body and made a mark where I want the curve to kind of start. I'm known for being slightly what people can call a chaotic sewer. I could take measurements, but I just held it up to my body. So here I am taking the ruler. I'm lining it up to the very top of the edge of the shoulder for the front, and I'm just making a line. This time I decided to go straight for the red marker. So I'm making a straight line going down. Now this is where the mark comes in. So now I make a straight line going across, so I have kind of an angle here. Now I'm going to take, I believe I take the pencil. Let's find out. It's a surprise to me. Do I use the pencil or do I use the red marker? Or I think right now I'm talking to Sekhmet. Okay, so here we go. I'm bringing out the book. So you see how I want to have a little bit of a curve here. I'm making mine slightly lower than it is on the in the book. I want to show a little bit more boob than the pattern in the book would do. So now I've just made a slight curve, and I just start cutting it out. So you'll see I'll just go straight up. Just making these small minor adjustments to the pattern. One other adjustment that I do make to this pattern is this one right here, where I'm straightening out and flattening out the front part of the bodice pattern. It has a slight little indentation and curve, so I'm just flattening it out like we want it to be from the book. So I cut off a very minuscule amount of pattern here, but it will make us, when we cut out the fabric and we sew the fabric, it will give us the correct shape in the end. One thing I also do is, because I am very short, I'm only 5 feet tall, but I have large breasts, I take off a few inches at the top of the shoulders. You don't see me do this on camera. I cut from 16 to the 6 size because that fits me the best in the shoulders. So here we are, 2 pattern pieces, back and front. Next, we go on to cutting the fabric. The fabric that I'm using right here is a canvas. You cannot see on this because of the camera and the lighting, but this has some very minor stains on it, which is one reason why I think I got this fabric at a Goodwill or some sort of a resale shop. Nobody wanted it. It had some very minor stains. Well, this will actually be a perfect fabric to make for the very innermost lining of this outfit because it will not be seen, but it is a very sturdy, thick fabric. It's 100% cotton. And here I'm using the pattern weights that I make in a previous video. I'm using a piece of chalk to mark along the pattern. Here I'm going to show you, this is just a regular piece of chalk. You can use Taylor's chalk, but I had this available also because you can find these pieces of chalk. I have a white box and a box full of colorful ones like this blue that I found. It was like $1 a piece or like $1 for both of them. Got a back to school sale. So, and because this chalk will not be seen, it's just to show me where to do the cutting. I'm not super concerned about it being the most straight and beautiful. So now I'm going to mark on the inside. These are going to be my darts. So I need to cut that part out. You could do the darts without cutting out the inner fabric in the inside, but I like to, especially when doing historical patterning, just go ahead and cut those out because you're going to have to iron it open or press it open anyway. So there I am marking off the bottom. I'm going to take the weights off. One reason I like using fabric weights or pattern weights as opposed to using pins is you can kind of do the adjusting a lot easier than you can if you have pins, and you can, it keeps the pattern a lot flatter than if you're using pins. Here I'm just kind of zooming in to show you where I have everything marked off in blue. Everything that is blue, that is where I'm going to cut. I don't have any dotted lines or broken lines, but the blue chalk are my cutting lines. These commercial patterns have seam allowances built in, so you do not have to, if you fit into one of the sizes they have, this one is 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, then you don't have to worry about adding a little extra seam allowance. Now, if you do not fit in those sizes, if you're making it smaller or if you're making it larger, you will want to throw in and go ahead and either draw in, or after you draw the pattern pieces, cut an extra seam allowance. So here I am doing the same thing I did on the back piece, just tracing around the outside. Because this is not an actual fabric chalk, I just have to do a little bit more pressure, but it works perfectly fine. And again, you're not going to be seeing this chalk. I'm not particularly worried about it being the most beautiful chalk line I've ever made in my life. The fabric weights that I have are the pattern weights. This is just ribbon that I found at Dollar Tree, and I've had in my fabrics and ribbon stash for a while. So I'm going to remove that piece. This was a very easy piece to draw because there's no darts or anything. It's just one solid piece. And on this fabric, I'm about to start cutting. I do have it doubled over. The back piece is cut on the fold, so you do not have a back seam. Here I am just cutting along I say here I am a lot in this video. Well, this is my first time doing voiceover and I don't have a script because I'm just watching the video and narrating along to myself. So here I go, just cutting out on all of those pieces that I drew earlier. Again, back to what I was saying before, I do have these cut doubled up, so I'm cutting out 2 pieces of fabric right now. The fabric scissors that I'm using are Fisker's angled edge scissors. I really, really like these because it means you don't have to lift the fabric up as much and you don't get as much distortion in your fabric as if you were using a non-angled scissors and you have to do a little bit more work on your wrist to get them nice and flat. So these I really, really enjoy. They're not the most fancy scissors, but one thing I also want to do with this channel is show you don't have to use fancy materials and fancy tools to make really great things. Same thing, just cutting around all of the blue lines. To move this down, I have a fairly small craft table, so even when I'm doing the drawing, I have to kind of move things around. You can see this is definitely my craft table because it's got paint all over it. I also take it camping, but the reason I'm recutting there is because I was only cutting through one layer. I also will probably not really ever edit out small mistakes like that because it doesn't have any big bearing on the whole project, because I want to show that even though I've been sewing for close to 30 years, sometimes you just accidentally just cut through one layer of fabric when you're supposed to be cutting through 2. So here I am cutting out the back dart. So the back piece is cut out and the front piece is cut out. This is going to be the innermost lining of the kirtle. I'm going to cut out another layer. It's going to be the lining that is closest to the skin. It will be touching the skin because I will have a shift underneath this. This will be made out of muslin. Here it is. This is my washed and ironed muslin. And the outer fabric, the fabric that you will see of the kirtle, will be made out of the 100% cotton green flannel that I showed earlier in the first series. All right, at this point, I have sewn the green flannel sections together, just like I've sewn together the lining sections, and I'm putting them all together. The green flannel is going wrong side to right side with the canvas so that the muslin is on the inside. So we've got muslin going wrong side to wrong side with the canvas, and the flannel going wrong side to right side onto the canvas. So the canvas is being sandwiched in between the muslin and the flannel. I'm sorry, you see my really messy apartment. I'm trying to set up the project here for you to see. What I'm doing at this point is lining up these seams at the shoulders because those are some very important seams that you want to make sure are even. I'm going shoulder to shoulder at this point to pin. For some reason, there we go. So I'm showing you the shoulder seam, and then I'm showing you, at that point, I have just pinned the other shoulder seam. So the seam going from the shoulder of where the neck is into the shoulder where the actual shoulder joint is. Now I am pinning around the outside. What I'm going to do on this is I'm going to baste down the shoulder, the armhole seams and the front and so the front part of the bodice and the neck part of the bodice, I'm going to baste down all 3 layers together. And from there is when I will start applying the binding. The bottom part where the skirt is attached, I do not baste down. That part is going to be sewn to the skirt, so I'm not worried about that. Here I am again. This is the, I believe this is the armhole. Yes, this is the armhole. These are generally, for me, the most finicky parts of a garment to make are the sleeves and armholes. So I make sure that these are very, very accurate to seam, and that the hems, or what I have here, the raw edges to raw edges, are pretty darn close. Not a whole lot to trim off here because I want these to be nice and tight because I don't want to lay flat when I get the binding on. So it's very riveting film footage of me pinning things down. I'm sure you're all very grateful to that. So I have the top, the front, and the armholes pinned down. I do not have, so that's the neck part, there are the armholes, and that's the bottom that I did not pin down because I'm not worrying about basting that right now. I'm just worried about basting down the layers in the sections that are going to have binding. So the front part of the bodice, the neck part of the bodice, and the armholes. We will worry about binding the bottom part later once we have the skirt attached to it. Here is the binding. The lighting on this is terrible. But what I've done for this is I have taken some scraps of the green flannel and I've cut 2-inch strips. Normally when you would do a bias binding, you would cut at a 90-degree angle. These are cut more like a 30-degree angle. The reason I did that is because I was just going off of the angle that we had already kind of started when we were cutting out the bodice, and in the sort of grand tradition of this outfit of using things that are leftovers, using what's left behind. None of the edges that we're doing for this have very complicated curved seams. The first part I'm going to do with 2 smaller pieces of binding are the front parts of the bodice. So I'm pinning down 2 of the pieces of binding, which is just, again, scrap flannel. I'm going to pin this down. I'm going to sew this down on my machine. Here comes the other side. I think I show you pinning the other side. I'm going to sew this part down. This part that I have pinned, it's going to get sewn on my machine. Then I will press the binding into the inside and I will pin it and then hand stitch this down. After I do that part is when I will do the binding at the neck seam, so from the back of the neck to the front, and I will do the same sort of process for the armholes as well. So again, I'm just pinning these things down. This is going to cover up all those raw edges on the inside. So we could do a binding as opposed to doing what's called a bag lining, where you sew right side to right side and turn something inside out. So here I have the binding sewn down. First thing I actually do is I trim down the seam allowance because I want the binding to be really, really close. So I'm going to trim down the seam allowance to anywhere between 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch, however close to the seam that you feel comfortable. I realized that I have it turned the wrong way to really see the seam allowance, so I flipped it around. You're going to see the hand basting stitches that I have on there, those kind of darker threads. They are actually getting cut off right now as I am cutting down the seam allowance. So I did hand baste those down because the hand basting stitches are generally easier to remove than a machine baste, even if you use the widest machine basting stitch. So I've trimmed this down. So what I'll do is I turn it under once and then turn the raw edge of the binding under. And I'm just going to show you right now how I pin this down. I turn it under and turn it under. I'm going to pin this down, but what I do after that is I press it down. After I press this, I'm going to I'm not going to use a basting stitch. I'm going to use what's called a whip stitch or a felling stitch to use to connect the binding to the lining, the muslin part of the bodice. I do the same thing to the armhole and the neck edges. Thanks for watching, guys. That was episode 2. That was me making the bodice. Next part will be me cutting out the skirt, putting the skirt on the bodice, and finishing off everything, which means adding the lacing rings and then showing you what a complete outfit will look like. Try not to end this video too abruptly, which was what would have happened if I had not done an outro like I'm doing right now. So I hope you guys have a great week. Have a great weekend whenever you're watching this. Have a great day. Have a great night. If you're watching this 3 years from now, I hope you're watching this 3 years from now. That means we made it out of the COVID crisis. And let's hope we make it that far. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.